We've got plenty of time for questions. So I'd like to start to take some questions down. I'm very excited because I've got some on the app as well. I've got somebody saying your jacket. Somebody said you got your jacket. No, somebody also said your jacket looks quite good, Adam, as well. Yeah. So we've got until. Can you just pass me my watch? Just on that card. We've got until about 3 o'clock to do some questions, and then we'll get onto some mental health stuff. But I'll go to the floor first, and then we'll take some questions from the app. Did you had one, Ollie?
Yeah, it's not really a question, but it's just our neighbours are like scared to death of HSE coming on the farm and fining them thousands and doing stuff wrong when it's only a father and son, say, working. You very much seem to come across as the sledgehammer approach. I know you've sort of got to, but how can you change it so that you're more friendly, if you will, and people do engage with you better? I've been to one of your events, you invite people, you show it, and I think farmers sort of prefer that because you've not got anything to hide as well. And they do take things home and do things when they get home. Yeah,
and I agree with that, and that fits in with the people need help to know what they're doing and know they're doing it right, and we will be doing more of that this year, actually trying to give some very clear, simple guidance. This is what it looks like when you're doing it right. Follow this, and if an inspector does knock on your door, you'll be okay. So we're trying to do that. We appreciate that there is a bit of an unknown factor. I wouldn't like to call it fear, because obviously I'm not a very fearsome person, but I do understand what you mean.
I have a follow-up here on the app, actually. Somebody, a group secretary said there's a perception that farmers don't need to comply with legislation as they won't be checked. It's actually something different to what you've said. But do you have any comment on that? Maybe some ideas on inspections or the figures of the inspections that you do or something like that?
We do carry out inspections, and we will continue to carry out inspections. What I'm actually trying to do with that is to tell people what we find so that you can all learn from that experience. And it is, it's an interesting challenge as to will you be checked. If you look at the total number of inspections HSE carries out across 1 million workplaces in Britain, it's a very small figure, and we focus on where we're going to make the biggest difference. But part of that is let's get the message out about what it looks like. The risk isn't whether or not we're going to be checked. If you're walking on a roof without anything to stop you falling through it, the risk of being checked is small. The risk of dying is massive. Work it out for yourselves, That's the sort of challenge we need to be getting back to people.
I've got two that I'll take together, 2 hands just here and then one at the back, but we'll do these two first. I'm going to go first.
I think in the farming community on safety in general, we're not very good. But I don't think the whole manufacturing industry assists us as well as they should. I regard today's tractors as no safer than when I first started driving over 60 years ago. I know we've got cabs, but some of the controls, I maintain all controls should be within half a metre of my shoulder. Some of them, the brakes are here, there and everywhere. There's no unification on where the controls are. My favourite one is PTO shafts and guards. The first guards that came out in the 60s were quite good. They were U-shaped, you could put them on, you could take them off, and you could grease the shaft. Today's PTO guards are totally inadequate. I bet there isn't a person in this room who can guarantee their PTO shafts in good order after 12 months. I got spoiled into market one PTO shaft made in Ireland. I bought one, and to this day I can't fit it to machine because the machine's got to be altered to take the PTO shafts, which is totally separate. The modern PTO shaft and guard is too heavy and too complicated to lift and put on. We've got this thing about stop the tractor and be safe before you get out of the cab. You cannot attach an implement to a machine on a tractor when the engine's not running with a PTO shaft and the hydraulics. You've got to have the tractor running. The other thing is, coming on one thing, you can hitch a 40-ton lorry and trailer just like that. You cannot have automatic hitch in tractors without paying a lot of extra money because the design of the 3-point linkage is obsolete. It should be more like fifth wheel coupling on a lorry. That's only a few.
Is there a question in there probably around the role of manufacturers, I think, in the farm? So we'll come back to that, I think. And then we had a question just behind that, yeah.
Hello, Andrew Boss, Nottinghamshire. Yes, I'm part-time farmer, part-time lecturer of agricultural students. And where I work lecturing, we've got a new health and safety specialist in who's reviewing all our risk assessments. He's ex-building trade. And We've always tried to encourage the students to do risk assessments, but he looked at them and said, no, we need them better. His ran to 4 sheets of A4 paper for bricklaying. Well, that's all right in the building trade, because the bricklayer will be doing his bricklaying all day, and next week he'll be doing bricklaying all day, and so on. I'm doing 8 jobs before breakfast. What would you expect us to do in risk assessments in a form that we can sell to the industry?
Okay, so what's the machinery industry doing, and how do we make risk assessments easy? What do we learn from construction?
Okay, I'll stand up because I couldn't see the gentleman that was asking the question, but manufacturers, as I said in my potted career history, I spent a lot of time working on machinery standards to make things better. I'd also look to the Farm Safety Partnership and look and say, you're the NFU, how many customers do you represent when you're telling manufacturers how you'd like it to be? There's an argument with PTO guards about if people are trained and it's set up properly, it helps and they last longer. It's a two-way argument because I can see your head nodding, but talk to the manufacturers. We've got the routes to do that. When it comes to risk assessments, to me, I'm being filmed, aren't I? God, I'm the head of agriculture at HSE and they're going to say, don't worry about the risk assessment. But what I mean is, risk assessment is a process, not a product. Risk assessment is a way of organising your thinking. Recording it is something that you have to do so you can review it, but it's actually about getting to the right answer. A lot of the stuff, if you pick up guidance from our website that says this is what you should do, effectively the risk assessment is done for you and we've come up with an answer. If you want a different answer, you do your risk assessment and say, can I work out something that is as safe? So it is about the way of thinking rather than about what you're writing.
I've got a question there, I think, here on the app from a group secretary. My members tell me it's all common sense. So as the experts, please tell me, is it?
Yeah, it's incredibly uncommon, common sense. Yes, it is, but there is, I'm going to use health and safety jargon, there is a hierarchy of getting it right, and it starts with eliminate the risk, then manage the risk, and then rely on people. So if the common sense is, I can see that bare PTO shaft spinning round and I won't get near it, that's not common sense, that's getting it wrong. If the common sense is, guard it so even if I do get near it, it won't bite me, that's common sense.
Right, I've got one at the back and one down here. We'll take those two together if that's all right. We've got a mic going around. John at the back there first.
Thank you, Adam. Several things really while I'm on my feet. Firstly, I think the NFU need to be congratulated for having this event today. Here we are. I don't know how many there are in this room. I'm guessing a couple of hundred. Now, not many years ago, any mention of health and safety, and the room would be empty. We would be the other side of Birmingham, not wanting to get anywhere near health and safety. So I think it is, firstly, superb and very relevant. I think it's a coming of age of our industry and, dare I say it, the NFU, that this hall is filled today. I think two other things I'd like to make, really. 2 other points, rather. Firstly, you haven't mentioned the word culture, and I think in terms of if farmers want practical advice in order to change their mindset, we have to change our culture. And I would think that there are 2 main things, one of which I've been loosely associated with, one I haven't. One is the thing that's on there, make the promise. Well, how long ago was it? I'm old enough to remember that, and I suspect a lot of people in this room are, but it hasn't been around for a very long time. The other is lens leg. We need tools to change our culture. Third and final thing, yes, you've quite rightly, Rick, said that there are lots of organisations that can help. The Farm Safety Partnership, Yellow Wellies, Farm Safety Foundation, etc., etc., etc. Surely it is time to have a Yellow Farm Safety Foundation or whatever and knock all those into one so that we can focus on improving the dreadful statistics in our industry.
Thank you, John. And then we had one down at the front, I think. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bill Quan, following that.
You've got a microphone just coming here as well. Sorry, go on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bill Quan. Following on from that question, I'd like to commend Tim Papworth for all the work he's doing and has done on behalf of our safety. And may I ask what segment he considered he was in before the accident and where he thinks he is now and the major changes that he's instructed within his business since? And the panel's comments, please. Thank you.
I think that's a good question. Tim also had his hand up, so if we go to, I think you were going to ask a question maybe, but maybe you need to answer one first. Yeah, Tim, just down here.
Yes, I've had a couple of accidents in my life, and I would like to say that my own farm business has significantly changed. We have an advisor come and help us on a monthly basis and look around the farm, and that's been a great asset because he always sees these things that we don't necessarily know. As you're on a farm every day, you don't notice one or two things like a gutter hanging or something about to fall or bale that's unsafe. But what I'd like to ask, my question I wanted to ask is that I did a risk assessment on that in 2014 myself, and I knew that I was not the right person to do a particular job on the farm, so I employed a contractor to do that job for me. And I thought I'd get a bona fide contractor who's a very skilled operator in that particular job sector to come and do a job for me on the farm. And he had an accident, and it nearly killed one of his employees. Now, he was taken to court by HSE, and so was I, as the farm owner. So it doesn't actually stop when you're the farmer and you've thought, well, I can't do this job myself, so I'll get a professional in to do the job, because actually I was taken to court and I was found guilty being the farmer that actually allowed a contractor on farm to do that job that I knew I couldn't do. So I'd like the HSE to come back to me on that. What are we going to do about that side of health and safety?
Okay, I mean, I can't comment on the specifics of yours, but the legal perspective is that the duty is on the person that's running the business. So even when you're bringing a contractor in, there's a responsibility there. And so I don't know the circumstances of that particular case. If you think back to that picture I showed of a lorry that's hit an overhead power line, there was a recent prosecution up in the northwest, death of a scrap man collecting scrap on a farm, hit the overhead power line and died as a result of the electric shock. And the farmer that owned the farm was prosecuted for that death. Now the reason is it was the farmer that had built the stack of metal around the bottom of the pole, so he was in complete control of that. Where he'd built the stack was wrong in the first instance, he hadn't warned the contractor and so on. So it's about that shared responsibility and the communication between everybody that's involved in managing those risks. And see, that's part and parcel, as I said, when you start looking at the advice we give about working together, sharing that information so that collectively we get it right. You can't just pass on the responsibility. And so I don't know the circumstances, Tim, so I can't comment specifically. But if you look at some of those, it isn't just I contract the risk out to someone else. It's actually about I get someone else and we work together to deal with it.
Could I just say, surely in those other circumstances, any contractor is not going to bother about health and safety, because he'd say, well, if it all goes wrong, the farmer gets the blame, not me.
That oversimplifies it, because it's a shared responsibility. And I'd say, you know, if you're in that position, you're the person that's actually telling them it's part of their responsibility too.
And so if you was putting up a building or something, and could you actually cover yourself by on the quote that they wrote, they will abide by HSE guidelines. So to put the nets up, because I've seen loads of contractors put roofs up with no nets, and it will be what you're saying is it will be me that's actually going to court if one of them falls over.
This could be a conversation that goes a really long way. There's a middle ground. If you're engaging the contractor and they have responsibilities in construction terms, there's a principal contractor that has responsibility, but there's responsibility shared all the way through. So it could be a really long conversation.
Yeah, I'm just conscious of time. I overheard a conversation. We've never met before, but I think you work for one of the legal panel firms with experience of health and safety on farms from a legal perspective. So you want to just come in, gentleman at the front here, just with a couple of points, and then I want to move on to some mental health things, but I certainly not wanting to close questions down because I've got some more on the app as well.
Okay, I'm Tim Hayden. I work for Clark Wilmot. We're panel solicitors in the southwest, but I'm also the deputy coroner for Somerset, and so I deal with the very worst of hearings in terms of fatal accidents in agriculture. I have certainly come across situations where contractor and farmer have been prosecuted. I'll simplify it by saying that in the case that I dealt with, it was a question of checking that the contractor had the right skills and the right qualifications to deal with the job that the farmer was asking him to do. And I think if he has, it's unlikely that the HSE would necessarily just go for the landowner or farmer. So that's simplifying it. I was going to ask a question anyway of...
Just very brief, please.
Rick, which was going to be brief, which you haven't mentioned the police style policy of saying if you do this, this and this, then you'll be fined huge amounts of money or you'll be locked up because some of these offences are imprisonable. We've had eye-watering sentencing guidelines now for 2 years, I think, since the new figures came in. My question is quite simply has that made any difference to the culture or to the number of prosecutions which have been taken?
Answering that in reverse order, it won't make any difference to the number of prosecutions. We take prosecutions on their merits. It isn't about what the fines will be. As yet, I would say in farming, we're not yet seeing the impact of it as the same way as we are in other businesses. There are other businesses that are really paying attention now with directors and companies getting monumental fines. The courts are seeing it. What's your turnover? This is the percentage that's going to make the message. I think we should focus on getting it right, not on what happens when it's gone wrong. I'd much rather avoid all the deaths and injuries because it would make my life so much easier. So that's the position I'd be taking, is saying fines are there, the legal process is there, and that's what we will have to do as a regulator if it goes wrong. What we prefer is working with you to make sure it doesn't, and we're not there.
Okay, we'll close that off just now because I want to introduce Aaron. But just before I do, just some thoughts from some work we've been doing and maybe think about my interactions with farmers when we think about mental health. I've been working for NFU for 10 years, and I always think if you have a meeting, a room full of farmers like this, you always feel good that we've done a meeting that people are interested in. But actually, the best bit is at the end, when you see how many people stick around. Because if everybody leaves, actually, you haven't really had a good meeting because everybody thinks I need to get home quite quickly. So the best meetings are when people stick around at the end. And one thing that I've really reflected on when we've been doing some more work on mental health and well-being is that I can't believe the number of farmers at the end who stick around. And that's because they want to see their mates. But often it's because they want to see their mates because they want to talk about something that wasn't at the meeting. And I think sometimes as an organisation we've underestimated that, or we don't think about that. But it's really, really important. And we can link mental health and well-being to accidents on farms, whether people are stressed. You know, one of the segments in Matt's presentation was about smaller farms where they might feel more under pressure. And they're also thinking about their own well-being and how that links to safety. So I'd like to introduce Aaron. Some of you might know Aaron from before when he used to work for NFU. He's now a trained psychologist and he's done a Nuffield scholarship on mental health and well-being in agriculture. And then we'll move on to questions after that. So keep going on the app because I've got some that I've missed from before, so I'll come back to it.